Rosalind shares the courage it took to finally commit to initiating her divorce, a decision that came with a wave of guilt, anxiety, shame, and deep concern over social judgment. Her story is one of bravery, truth, and reclaiming her voice in the face of overwhelming pressure. If you've ever struggled with emotional weight of a life altering decision, this episode is for you.
Welcome to Awakening Soul Divinity, your sacred space for deep healing and transformation. Listen to inspiring conversations with healing experts, spiritual guides, and teachers as we explore ancient wisdom, modern healing, and powerful stories of change. I'll also share practical insights from my personal journey, from spiritual crisis to inner purpose. Whether you're seeking to overcome anxiety, embrace your true nature, or awaken your higher self, this podcast offers guidance to help you transform your life and elevate collective consciousness.
Welcome, Rosalind. I'm really excited you decided to join me on this journey. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Yeah, let me just say we've known each other for a pretty long time based off of similar experiences and similar work that we've done, which I'm sure and I hope that you get into while we talk. And so on that note, can you go a little bit deeper into this trauma that you experienced so our audience can hear just how profound it is and how that personal journey of yours got you where you are now and into the work that you do?
Okay, we'll dive in then.
Okay.
So I was married and not so happily married. And over the years, I started feeling less and less happy in the marriage and feeling that I was losing my son. My son was 11 years old at the time I decided I had to get out and have a divorce. But it took me years, over 5 years of personal growth, going to therapy, going to workshops, everything imaginable, courses and books and seminars to see if I was making the right decisions. I was stuck. And the feeling of being stuck is one of the worst feelings in the world because you just feel that there's no direction to go in. And so I kept putting off the decision, and it was based on a tremendous amount of guilt because I loved my son and I didn't want to be responsible for screwing him up emotionally and psychologically. And I was worried about what the outcome was going to be. And my husband was a good man. He wasn't a bad father or a bad person, but we were not compatible.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues that started getting more dramatic was that he was the good dad, making me the bad mom, the good cop, bad cop. And so whenever anything happened that my son didn't like, he went to dad, and if mommy said this, daddy would say, "Oh, don't worry, you could do that." And it got worse and worse and worse. And here he's 11 years old, and I'm projecting to the teen years what it's going to be like when good old dad is letting him do whatever he wants. And I felt that I was going to lose my son, that I was slowly, the bond we had, which was so strong, was severing because he was getting his way. All kids will manipulate their parents. It's what kids do, but when they test the waters, but this was getting worse and worse. So I remember distinctly I was at a intensive personal growth workshop. I think it was a 3-day weekend, and we were doing all of these processes. And you have the leaders who have these very intricate, involved processes to get you to get in touch with what are you feeling, what's motivating you, where are your fears, etc. And we were doing a laying down process. I was on the floor laying down, and they started asking us questions about projecting ahead. What's your life going to be looking like in a year or 5 years or 10 years from now if you don't make this change that you want to make, but you're afraid to make? And I just lost it. I remember
Mm.
getting hysterical and just lying on the floor for like 30 minutes and crying my heart out. And that became the catalyst for my realizing I need to do this. I can do this. I will do this. I will have the courage to break off this marriage and face whatever the consequences are because I need to do this for me and I need to do this for my son. But it was such an extreme experience of getting in touch with all the guilt and the shame and the pain that I was holding on to for so long and finally saying, I deserve this. It's okay for me. And I knew that it was the right thing ultimately for my son. So I
Mhm.
made that decision and it was tough and dad was not happy about it. And he guilted me. He kept saying, look what you're going to do. You're going to destroy our family. You're going to destroy our son. And whenever he said that previously, which was several times over several years, that really took its toll and weakened me. But this time, something shifted and clicked and
Mm.
I just knew I
Yeah.
knew now that I had to stand up for me. I had to do it and I did and I was steadfast and to ease the way I left the house, left him the house with the furniture and everything else so he could continue parenting, and I moved out and started from scratch getting an apartment with every fork and plate brand new because I was literally starting from scratch. But
Yeah.
knew it I knew if it was the other way and I was trying to kick him out, it would take another year to work those details out. So
Mhm.
I was happy. It was a new beginning for me. I was starting fresh and clean, and we split custody of my son. And I intuitively knew a lot of the things that I shouldn't do. I knew that I didn't want to badmouth his father to my son, that that was going to hurt him, my son, and that that isn't a smart thing to do. So I didn't want to alienate his father, and I wanted him to have love and respect for me and see me as the woman I was independently.
Mhm.
And I we my ex and I worked it out because there wasn't a lot of information about parenting and co-parenting and divorcing effectively back. This was back in the 90s. So
Okay.
it was another universe.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd like to break in with a quick question about
Sure.
that. I'm glad you said the year because back in the 90s there was a whole different mentality about how all this stuff worked. The part when I read about the social judgment, back in the 90s and prior,
I
people looked at you like, when my parents got divorced, my they got divorced in 1975, and people, I mean, you didn't do that
right,
in that
right.
time, right? And so how was that for you? I mean, were because you did it the way you did it that you just described the best way possible, how was that for you to make that shift? And also, when you were doing at the same time when you were doing the course, having that support, was that the only place you were getting the support, or were you getting it from people that you thought were going to judge you?
Family and friends were very supportive, and I'm very lucky. My sister's a psychotherapist. Most of my friends are psychotherapists.
Helpful, helpful.
I had very enlightened
Yeah.
friends to support me, so I wasn't getting blamed and guilted the way I feared, because a lot before it was all in my head, what are people going to say? What are people going to do? But the reality was that people did support me,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned so much about what to do and what not to do during the process. And it was dad who was trying to shame me and blame me and guilt me a lot. But fortunately, I was so ready by then. I was so prepared because I had put it off for so many years that dad didn't have the impact that he wanted to have and tried to have. And
Mm-hmm.
my son very quickly assimilated to, living with me half the time, living with his father half the time. And he adapted because the one thing that's most easy to do if you are divorcing with children is to stay in the same environment, so that I moved very close by. So my son was still in the same school, same friends. He had friends on this block. and he had the old friends, and he met new friends. So he adapted much more readily because of that.
Mhm.
Had one of us moved off to another environment, it would have been much more difficult for an adjustment for my son. But I remember being very aware of the fact that he was learning from me. And I remember watching shows like Oprah
Mhm.
and sitting my son down next to me and saying, you know, mommy is starting to date now, and you see how upset that woman was with what happened in her relationship and how mean that man was to her and how disrespectful. Mommy doesn't want that to happen to me, and I want you to be very aware and mindful when you grow up and start dating that you're not going to treat women like that. So I was constantly talking to my son about ways to treat women respectfully and lovingly, and be aware of how hurt and wounded they are when you lie, when you're disrespectful, when you're arrogant, when you're abusing women.
Mhm.
So he got his whole teen years got a strong dose of understanding what it's like for women. And I think every young boy should have that because it makes a big difference emotionally and psychologically for them before they get out into the dating world, to understand that we have feelings as well as they have feelings. And you have to be aware that people cry, people get hurt. It's very hard when you're doing that. So he saw me go through many, many years of being single and dating, and that became an extended part of the process for him to watch that situation take place. And then I remarried 8 years later. I met a man and got into a serious relationship, and ultimately we got married. And then my son learned about adapting to a
Mhm.
part in his life. Well, actually, he adapted several times because I had a few serious relationships over the years, and he had to learn how to adjust to that. And I had to learn how to select partners that not only are going to be healthy and mindful for me, but partners that are going to be good for my son, respect my son, treat him well, and not be abusive in any way. So there was a huge amount of it. It was like a college course in divorcing and growing up and co-parenting after divorce that
Mhm.
happened in my personal life. The climax is that one day when my son was in his early 20s, so he was 11 when I divorced, he's in his early 20s, and he comes to the house and he says, "You know, Ma, you and Daddy did a really good job with your divorce, and I really want to thank you for that because most of my friends whose parents divorced really hate their parents or are very angry at them. And I think you guys really did a great job." And
Oh.
let out a sigh of relief. I was so shocked, and I said to myself, wow, I really learned a lot and made a huge transformation
Mhm.
during the course of from the divorce to this moment. And that became the moment that I realized that I had a lot to share with other people. And I became a divorce and co-parenting coach, and then founded the Child Centered Divorce Network. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years.
And that's how I met you,
Exactly.
from my experience. So I'm going to just share for the audience a little bit about that. And I wanted to ask you because there's a difference. What your story is powerful to me in that you were able to walk through this with as much ease and grace as possible, and the resulting effect for your son to be able to thank you for that experience and for you to be able to stay the course in that way to get to the other side. Now, for somebody like me and a lot of other parents, like you were saying, because this is not a normal scenario out there, especially in, the realm of custody and divorce. My situation was partially, and this is how I had to go through healing myself in my journey. Like I couldn't even see that. what you were finding and going through. My personal development course didn't come until my son was 23 and we took the course together after everything happened. So my trauma, his trauma, the way the whole family, just did what happened, and it was nothing like that. And they call it parental alienation. There's a little bit other language for that. Family bond obstruction and a couple of other different things. People are still, I guess, trying to figure out exactly what to call it. But it didn't work the same. And when I met you and kind of watched you, and I didn't know the whole story, now I'm hearing the whole story and I'm like, man, because I know that there were instances where I had to fight just to tell my kids that all of us loved them and that we were here for them, and I got denied that opportunity. So my kids struggled, I struggled, so we went through this whole thing. And what is very important to me for you to be put out there for is that, your experience on what to do as opposed to the things not to do are so like helpful to guide people in that direction. So we know, especially, being a divorce and what is it, the co-parenting coach? Yeah. Being a divorce and co-parenting coach, you also can kind of sit with and hold the space for people to recognize what to do. Like if I had again, back in when all this stuff was going on with me in the early 2000s, there was no such thing as this. I mean, I barely could find the stuff I needed to know online, period. There was one person out there doing, I think it was parental alienation awareness. And I forget her name right now. The first person who was out there who started sharing that information for parental alienation. And so when I first got into it, there was nothing out there, and then I started doing my research. And then when I moved down to Florida, which was closer to where you are, I started getting involved with these groups and I was doing all this stuff and met you. I don't even remember honestly how we met, but I noticed that I was doing I had done some things that I could have done differently because I was so focused on healing, which was also important. So can you share a little bit about the, you went through your own healing process and you never really, but you've seen people come in like me, right? Who went through the dark. Yeah. So can you share some experiences, I guess, with clients that you've had to kind of guide people in how to work through that part of it? Because the healing process is important to come to self so you can work through everything else. Because if you don't, from my understanding and experience, you can't make a good parent. You can't make a good co-parent because you're not here. You're here. You're in your head. You're in your, whatever. Can you kind of elaborate or fix that? What I just said, I'm not sure exactly how I was going to word that, but yeah.
Sure. So obviously, when someone's self-esteem is just torn apart, because how could you not have your self-esteem, your self-image, and everything about yourself be mashed when you go through any experience close to parental alienation, when the child or children that you love more than life is slowly or rapidly being taken away from you because of lies and deceit and corruption and manipulation and all kinds of other behaviors that are toxic, with the goal of pointing to you and saying you're not a good person, you're not a good mother, you're not a good parent. I can't fathom anything more disheartening and egregious to happen to a parent. So my heart goes out to you and everyone who's experienced that. The most important thing you have to do is heal from within that experience before you could possibly move out. How could you be expected to be parenting at a point when you've been thrown such a horrible experience in your life. So your coping skills have to be strengthened, and your self-love have to be strengthened, and you really need to understand that this is not about you. This is about what someone else's perception was and what someone else did and basically did to you, because you're not getting an opportunity to share, to explain, to justify, to validate, or anything. You are being accused and being damned, and that's beyond horrible in a parenting equation. Anyone who understands anything about the psychology of relationships and families and parenting knows, even if it's justified that there's a parent who has weaker skills or is not parenting properly, there's no excuse for taking a child away from a parent unless that parent is actually being abusive, physically and emotionally abusive. And in most of these cases, people like you, that's not the circumstance. You're being manipulated into someone else's story about what they're trying to talk to make you out to be, and they have lots of motives. Sometimes they have mental health issues that are behind all of this and create a lot of this abuse, and they're not even aware of how abusive they're being. Sometimes there's financial excuses or justifications or reasons for this behavior, or something that they're going to get out of it. Sometimes they're just jealous, very insecure, bullying types of people. Others are very narcissistic, and so they just feel that they should have ownership of the children, and you don't have the rights. There's all kinds of craziness, because what people do is justify their behavior in their heads. We all justify our behavior. The problem is when we're justifying toxic behavior, then it becomes justified, and most people who are caught in that are not going to open up and allow themselves to let go. So they stand strong, and it gets stronger and stronger and more toxic month after month, year after year. It's the furthest thing from a win-win situation, which is what I was trying to create as much as possible, everything about win-win, because my focus, it's not that I was so brilliant, my focus was understanding
Brilliant.
like it's understanding what it's like for the children because
Yeah.
the children are being manipulated, coerced, and abused in ways that the kids are basically innocent. They don't understand what's happening. They don't understand the truth of what is and what was, and they don't have a lot of choices in the matter. And also, very often in parental alienation, the children will, because of fear, because one parent is so much more dominant and powerful and bullying, the fear of the experience will get the children to side with the most powerful, dominant parent. And even though they may have been close to the parent who's being alienated, fear gets them to move on the other side and take sides against you, making it even more outrageous and heartbreaking for
Yeah.
a parent who's experiencing all that. So
Which, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, basically, knowing all of that is going on, it's imperative that you do some inner work on boosting your own self-esteem, knowing that and believing that I'm a good person, that I'm a loving person, that I'm a loving parent, that I don't deserve this, and that I can go on despite what's happening, because it can just bring you down where you have no desire to even live any longer. And so you need to develop great strength and confidence and love for yourself. I believe that love for yourself is the greatest tool and greatest support system that you could have to help withstand whatever craziness that you're dealing with.
Yeah. It's never too late. It's still never too late to get that though. And it actually kind of leans into the the subtitle of what this podcast is, uncovering the truth of who you are, because that is your truth, your self-love, your self-esteem, your you're actually bigger than you think you are. We're bigger than we think we are. We get small because we don't know what else to do. We're not trained, and we're programmed to get small when someone else is getting big over us. Like I just remember I had a flashback during my healing process of my mother, who happened to be 5'2", and I'm 5'4". But when I was little, I had this vision of her, and she was never physically abusive, but she was emotionally abusive. And I just had this vision of her, like, and as a child, I'm venturing to bet that a lot of children see that, but they don't know how to express that or share it. And that's where I wanted to, because that truth is important. There's a truth inside of us that we get to find by doing this work. And the other thing I wanted to bring up too, I have a question, because I've been saying this because it's my belief and understanding from research and personal experience that children in these situations, or really in any situation, it's not natural for them to push a parent out of their lives, because you said, and I've seen this and experienced it, where there are parents that are drug addicts, there are parents that are going through all kinds of things, that mental situations or whatever, that the children still want to be with them. I mean, like CPS, I guess, if they come to the door and the child will, I think I read this at one point, the mother is holding on to the child or whatever, and she just happened to be a drug addict or something, and they were coming to take the child away from this mother, and the kid grabbed onto her tighter and didn't want to let go of her. And that to me is more natural and normal for children to do than be lied to or not told the whole truth in order to, think that the other parent, become fearful of the other parent and push the other parent out. So the naturalness of the child itself is being broken apart. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's definitely not natural for anything around alienation to take place. That's not a norm. And for kids to accept it, a lot of time and a lot of manipulation has to take place, because anyone over time, if they're told the same thing over and over and over and over again, that especially as children, they're going to believe what they're being told.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so easy to manipulate children from a young age. And a lot of them have no idea that they've been manipulated, that they've been abused, that they've been put into situations that are abnormal in family dynamics. They don't know the difference, and many of them never haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
Than
Yeah.
that.
So then my question becomes, what would you say to an adult child of parental alienation, or this type of, hostile divorce, or even just, whatever goes on in this is all not great to talk about, but it just needs to be talked about. What would you say to the adult child who is still holding on to this, belief system, and is still having a hard time with it, and still won't let go, and still won't make an effort, or still is fearful of that parent?
I think
say that
we as the parental adults need to understand their circumstances as much as possible, be very empathic and put ourselves in their shoes. They should be putting themselves in our shoes. That's the only way you can understand and be empathic. But if they've never thought about doing that, or no one's ever guided them in that direction, then and they're not, then they're missing out. But we have to put ourselves in their shoes, because if that's the experience that they've grown up in, we can't hold them responsible for not being warm and loving and empathic if they've been told and role modeled that that's not the way to behave. It's like growing up in a racist family your whole life. People are taught these things. They're not born this way. And those kids are innocent. Now as adults, they have a much broader perspective and can understand a lot of conflicting situations and understand what may have happened to them. And some of them do. Some of them understand, but some of them won't. Some of them don't. Some of them are just stuck in the pattern that they've grown up with. They don't want to expand their minds beyond, or they're very close to the dominant parent, and they feel a sense of betrayal if
Yeah.
if they suddenly start saying, questioning that parent, or saying maybe what you're telling me is wrong. It's a very challenging situation. Those kids are suffering in ways that they're not aware of, and only looking from the outside in can we see and understand the terrible situation they're in, because we want them to suddenly get it. We want them to become enlightened and say, now that you're an adult and you heard my story,
Or didn't.
and that's even worse. If they didn't, then why would they ever change their opinion? That
Mhm.
so, and you could go through the rest of your life never having a connection. And then some who have heard are not comfortable saying that makes me wrong. That makes what I've done for half of my life a mistake. Can I accept myself that way? It's easier to accept the role that I've been in, the mindset that I've been in. And so the complications of this situation are as convoluted and deep and toxic as anything imaginable in relationship dynamics. I mean, you are in the pits on so many levels, and it takes a great deal of consciousness to be able to first accept the reality, continue to love yourself and create a life for yourself that's not dependent on my kids behaving this way or that way when they grow up, because you don't know. And that not everyone is able to do that, but I certainly recommend reaching out for professional support as much as possible from people who've lived and breathed it as you have, people who know what you're going through, and people who can remind you that there's nothing wrong with you when
Mhm.
when this happened to you. You are a victim of circumstances that are beyond your control.
Mhm.
It doesn't make you a bad person, a bad mother, a bad anything. And that's what's really important to know.
That is, it is. And I'd like to add the bad mother, father, parent, whatever, situation, grandparent, whatever situation it is, that it took me personally years to recognize that I actually was a good parent, am a good parent, and have always been a good parent that made not great decisions sometimes. But what parent always makes great decisions? There is no perfect parent. Even though some people like to believe that, okay, there's nothing we can do about that. But going back into, this bringing us into the pits on so many levels, like you just said, it's this the struggle to that we unintentionally put ourselves in because we keep ruminating. I remember ruminating over and over and over and over again for years about, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Why am I such a bad mother? Why this? Why that? And then being told later that I was actually not a bad mother and having to walk through that. But the struggle comes where if we don't do the healing work, if we don't continue to release these emotions that we have stuck in our bodies. And believe me, as parents who have lost a child that is still alive, that's a huge challenge for a lot of parents, because how do you grieve that, And so that kind of led me into the work that I do with trauma, grief, ancestral healing because it moves into another generation. You know, I mean, there's so many things wrapped around this. Like you said, it's like this deep hole that you can keep going in. But do you want to be in the hole, or do you want to be on solid ground and be in a position where you can not only help yourself and heal yourself, but then you can step out and do work with other people and help them get through this? And that's where, like, 4 years ago, 2 years ago, I wasn't here. You know, I'm finally in a place where I can, and I've been dealing with this for over 26 years. So my kids were 4 and 10 when it started, and now, you know, it's a long story. Let's put it that way. But we don't have to stick to the story. We can change the story and change our lives by doing the healing work and finding that self-love within ourselves, right?
That's a very, very important point you make. That's pivotal to everything, is just what you said. We have to change the story. We have to be mindful of what we're telling ourselves at all times. I talk to clients about that continuously. What am I telling myself? Catch yourself, write it down, because we don't hear the stuff that's going on in our minds, and we beat ourselves up. We're our own worst enemies in most cases. And so if we're telling ourselves and we're caught in a story, and that story can be repeated not only for days and months, but years and decades if nothing stops it. And the only thing that can stop it is conscious awareness to be aware, oh my God, look what I'm telling myself about my.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder I'm feeling depressed and sad and this and that and the other thing, and getting ill and all other consequences. So it's crucially important that we shift what we're telling ourselves, shift what we believe about ourselves, and have empathy for ourselves first.
Mm-hmm. And forgiveness.
And forgiveness.
That is a big kicker that yeah.
Absolutely, forgiveness is the deepest way that we could go to healing, because we have to start by healing ourselves and forgiving ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to experience empathy for other people who are caught in circumstances that they're not aware that they're caught in, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of victims that someone started this, someone who I consider very evil started this process, but there's a lot of victims throughout the family dynamic as a result of all of this.
Yeah, yeah. And real quick, going back to the forgiveness piece of it, like, I had the hardest person to forgive is yourself,
Yes.
because, you know, not only are you doing it because you feel not good enough from years of childhood trauma of your own, then you get, it stacks on top and you get told continually you're not good enough. And so why would you forgive yourself? Well, here's the reason. The best way to get through that forgiveness that I've found is I forgive myself for not knowing any better at the time. Because when you know better, what is her name? Maya Angelou. When you know better, you do better, right? If you are that person, that's how that works. And so that's where the forgiveness comes in. So, you know, when you're little, when you're younger, as parents, when you're younger, you didn't do anything wrong. You got caught up in whatever the programming was, whatever that is. But when you're an adult, you take responsibility for being in that victim place where I was obviously there and I kept myself there. It wasn't that I was a victim and I got out. It was I was a victim and I kept being a victim, and da, 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 and it went on and on. And until you do that, until you shift that thought process, it's like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. How do I change this?
And that's a key philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to get sick and tired of your story and staying in your drama,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
know that you have the key to unlocking that and changing it and shifting it. Only you. We're not
right.
waiting for some hero to come along into our lives. We can do it at any point, but that's uh, an insightful
Mm-hmm.
awareness that most people don't have, and unfortunately let so much time go by feeling the deep hurt and woundedness that tears their lives apart.
And here's the kicker, because you brought up the word consciousness, because in the universe, The law of attraction, we're going to use that phrase. You attract whatever energy you're feeling. So if you consistently stay in that energy, you create and attract more of that same energy. When you start doing the work to step out of that energy, let me tell you something. I mean, I still go through my stuff. I still have moments when, I'm still, wondering why it happened. I still fall in that hole sometimes. But now the attraction is to pull myself out of that, or have pulled myself out of that. And now I'm attracting things into my life that are like things that I never thought would show up. And that's so important. And it's like that's where the consciousness part comes in, because the higher our vibration goes from healing, the higher we raise our consciousness, and the more we start attracting things into our life that are not that, and to me, it's an opportunity. Now I see all of that stuff that I went through, all that stuff that you went through, Rosalind, all of it was an opportunity for our souls to just say, oh, well, maybe this is something I need to shift. And that's really all it is. It doesn't feel that way. And it's very painful. And that's part of our humanity. So I wanted to ask you something specific to the work that you do, just so that people can get an idea of how they can, especially if they're like at the beginning of a potential divorce or whatever. I want you to be able to share that. So, can you share a couple of crucial questions that divorcing parents should ask themselves before making any decisions about a divorce?
Do I love my children more than I may dislike or
Hmm.
hate my ex?
Ah, yes, that's a big one.
That one is huge and profound when you think about it, because if you get stuck with the hatred you have for this other person, and we all justify, and there's real reasons, there are some very bad people who do some very bad things. But if that's predominant, and getting back, and resentfulness and anger and hurt to hurt that other parent is stronger than your love for your child, then your children will pay the price for that divorce and that relationship breakup. And that is on you. That is harming your own children that you love. So we need to step up and be bigger as parents. We need to be role models so our kids are watching us and learning how we're behaving with
Mm-hmm.
tough situations. So that's my universe that I'm in. I'm not, most of my clients are not deeply into parental alienation, because I will refer them to other people whose universe is parental alienation. But I have a lot of clients who are very vindictive and resentful, and justifying their feelings about this ex who did this, this, and this, and what a terrible person they are. And I have to remind them that if you have children, then you have to be walking on a different path, because you can't just be bad mouthing and criticizing their other parent, because it hurts and wounds them. And that's the beginning. We don't want our kids to have any experience. It's not their fault you're getting a divorce. And they're innocent. And if parents remember that, then they make more mindful decisions, is what I call it. And they're aware of the consequences of those decisions. And I like to catch them as early on as possible, to say, you have a choice. And if you make this choice, this is what's going to likely happen down the road. If you take that path, this is what's going to happen. What do you want for your kids? Another question I ask them is, how do you want your children to feel about the way you handled your divorce when they're grown adults? Do you want them to say thank you like my son did, which what I call is the happy ending that most of us should be looking for? Or do you want your kids to hate you or resent you, or disconnect the relationship with you because they realize that they were abused, that they were manipulated, that they were lied to, whatever the situation is? We see too much of that, and it doesn't have to happen. So that's what I'm about, is shaking those parents up as early on as possible to say, you can make better choices than this. And when
Right.
they do, it eases the way, and everyone in the family just has an easier path
Yeah.
moving on in life.
Well, and yeah, absolutely. When you said that, I was like, I hadn't thought about that in a long time. And what I noticed is, or what I remembered is like one thing that I really took a look at was, in the best way that I could, was that I loved that other person at one point. So at least kind of take a look at that because that other person is also your child's other parent. And that child is 50% of both of you if we're talking about a, you know, an act, a birth from the two people that are together. I mean, there are other circumstances and we're kind of we're generally in this one space, but
Yes.
just that. And you know, why, if you're, why, just take a look at how long you want to hold on to anger and cause yourself to literally deteriorate, because your body, when it holds on to anger, it creates disease. So I feel like there's a lot of thought processes that definitely need to go into this, putting the child first. However, there's also, in the old school way of thinking, in the best interest of the child. People used to say that all the time, but they were coming from an adult court version of that rather than from the child's version of it. Like, really, what is the best interest of the child is to have both parents, if they're both, you know,
They can
good
work
enough
together.
parents to be
Right.
in their life, right?
Exactly.
So what are key messages our children need to hear when
They
talking about divorce?
two most crucial things children need to hear is that they need the right to love both parents,
Yeah.
despite what you may think of the other parent, and they need the right to be loved by both parents, despite what you think of that other parent. If parents can start with that simple understanding, parental alienation doesn't take place because the children need to be able to love both parents. The children are able be need to be able to say, you know, I loved seeing daddy last night without the mother making harmful comments about it and saying, hey, can I call dad while we're here tomorrow? Those kinds of simple, innocent little things that some parents will stop and start a process where they make the kids feel it's toxic to be able to express love or liking or appreciation for the other parent. It's a huge mistake. It's never the right thing to do, and it starts everything off in the wrong path. But that's unfortunately what we're living with, and that's why I'm so passionate and keep doing this because, like you, I'm campaigning to see if we could right some wrongs.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you said that because it's so important, and the world starts with the children, and there's so many. This isn't the only
They're
suffering.
innocent, right? And they're innocent.
They're innocent, and these innocent children. This is not the only suffering that these children are experiencing. There are so many things going on in the world right now, directly, at children because they're easily controllable. And so people take advantage of that. And it's just something that needs to shift in the world. And that's, again, like you said, that's why we're here to just awaken, hopefully, the humanity in people as best as possible. Because when we start with ourselves, that's when we can come out and be there to support. Like, no matter how much you want to help these children, and you believe you want to do that and you know it in your heart, and it's like this thing that you've always wanted to do, you probably won't be able to do it unless you help yourself first. So having
That's the right
someone,
answer.
right, and having someone like Rosalind in your life to help guide you through this particular thing will help you to get to that place where you can do things to help your children, other children. And sometimes what's really odd, and most of us don't really understand, is that life has a way of bringing you the things that you want back into your life, but not exactly the way you want it to be. Like, I've had children come into my life that I can love on and I can adore and I can do all the things that I was never
Wow.
allowed to do when all this stuff was going on with my children. And I do my best, to do that with my kids the best I can in the circumstances for both of them that I have with them now. And that's important to me, even though they're adults. And so just to understand that.
Bless you for that because you've been through such a tough road. So you're doing everything right.
I hope so, because it's been, I mean, and thank you for saying that, because for my entire life until I started actually diving headfirst into this journey, it's like I'm not doing anything right, so because nothing is working the way I want it to, and nothing is turning out the way I want it to, and I still, all these different things are happening that I don't want to keep happening, but I do see that now, and thank you for validating that, because that's just it recognizes all of the work that I've done over 36 years to get on the other side of that. So in that statement, if you could offer one piece of advice to someone who's just starting out on their healing journey, what would it be?
Remember that you need to love yourself first before you could love anyone else, including your children. So do the inner work to feel good about yourself and get the support you need. No one should be going through any of this alone. Emotional crisis is not designed for us to handle it alone. We need support. We need to find support that we feel confident in. And we need to remember that we are good and loving people. And you are not an abusive person when you're a victim of a parental alienation circumstance taking place. Even if you made mistakes in parenting, which we all do, no one deserves the kind of outcomes that we've been hearing about and talking about. So love yourself, forgive yourself, as you've mentioned, it's so important, and reach out. Don't let another day go by without reaching out for help and support. There's wonderful books, there's wonderful professionals out there, and it'll make all the difference in the world for you.
Can you share a good book that you feel would be helpful? And then we could put a link to that book in the description.
I have a wonderful book, and I've been sitting here trying to think of the name of it, and I'm drawing a
And
blank.
I and I
Um,
just
so,
threw you under the bus. Oh no.
yeah,
So we'll figure that book out and we'll add it in the description. And,
that would be great. I will.
yeah, we'll do it that way. That's okay. And what was the other thing I was going to ask you? No, can't remember that one. Okay. How do you define awakening?
Awakening is discovering that you are running your own show. You are the center of your universe. And once you realize that there's no one who has more power than you in your
Hmm.
life, then that's a whole different mindset. So you can take advantage of all the options that are out there, but you need to understand that every decision you make is coming from you, and you at any point in time can shift anything you're doing, anything you're believing, any actions you're taking, and shift it and make changes within. We are the center of our universe, and we can learn and grow and change and shift as much as we want to and need to.
And it is possible. Well, no, it is probable. I think that's the right way of saying it. Thank you. That was beautiful. What does soul divinity mean to you?
Soul divinity is the fact that there's something deeper within ourselves that we may not be consciously aware of reaching, but it's there within us, and we should turn within whenever we have questions, whenever we have challenges. Let our soul divinity guide us and lead us, and listen to that and start trusting yourself more.
I love these answers. Okay, thank you. How can people get in touch with you?
My website is childcentereddivorce.com. Very simple, childcentereddivorce.com. I have a free ebook right at the top of the page, and I have a lot of valuable resources, free ebooks and courses and programs, and then low-cost programs. And the option for one-on-one coaching before, during, and long, long after divorce, because most of my work is on co-parenting, blended families, dating after divorce, all of those things that are important. If you have children and you're in that kind of a world, then I have resources that can be helpful.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to share that the information, the links and everything will be in the description. And also, just to reiterate, Rosalind doesn't specifically work with parental alienation. However, she is part of the groups that do work with it to assist, if I think I'm saying that correctly, to assist with guiding people through parental alienation as well. So most of her clients are not technically involved in parental alienation, but I wanted to bring it out because that's how we connected, because Rosalind does, they say that Rosalind, because Rosalind does this work to help and assist with parental alienation. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And the last question I have is, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
So remember, as a parent, you're a role model, and that's the toughest job in the world. And it's tough to be a role model in a circumstance when we're overwhelmed with, I don't know what to do myself. But remember that children are watching and learning from you, and being honest, being able to sit down, look them in the eyes and say, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have said that or done that. Even if it's 5 or 10 years ago that it happened, your children will value and appreciate your candor, your honesty, and your willingness to be humble. And you're teaching them the ability to be honest and humble and apologize and own, take responsibility for their own behavior. And boy, what an important lesson that is for every parent to teach their children, to take responsibility for their behaviors.
That's right. Wow. Thank you, Rosalind. Appreciate that. And I just wanted to add one more thing. And you kind of touched on this last answer. Children watch, right? They don't listen to anything, but they're always watching. So the role model piece is like so important, to be the person that you want them to be, because you can tell them up and down, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to be, this is what you got to, how you got to act, and they're not going to hear that. But if you behave in the way that you want them to be, they will see that. And that is, to me, is a huge, and powerful just way of being a parent.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it took me a long time to learn that. So I just wanted to point that out for the audience, just so, that's just how we have to do it, or get to do it. And hopefully even all the parents who have been involved with parental alienation, even the ones that are doing that, hopefully that's something that they can recognize themselves, because they're still watching, and also too, some of these parents have also done some of their healing work, so they can see that too. And yeah. So Rosalind, thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful to you. I mean, you literally have been in my life, off, back and forth, online, whatever, for I think 7 years now. I'm not even sure how long it's been. And your energy has guided me, even though we've never worked together specifically on my stuff, but your energy has guided me. And I'm so grateful. I'm just grateful that you decided to join me.
And I'm so grateful that you're doing the work you're doing, because you're helping so many people beyond what you even know. So keep up that wonderful work, because it's desperately needed.
Thank you so much. Do it again. Okay. Thank you for being here on Awakening Soul Divinity, and we look forward to seeing you on the next interview. And you have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are. Do the best you can.